Hello, everybody, and welcome to another webinar with NAHT and Discover Education. It's great to have your company, and I'm sure it must be tremendously challenging and very busy at the moment. My goodness me, what a beginning of term it must have been for a great many people on this call. So we really are absolutely thrilled that you can join us, and really looking forward to having some of your comments and questions and on the chat as we go along. As we discuss controlling the controllables, we thought was the right title for it. And goodness me, that's a challenge at the moment, isn't it? But if anybody can help us with that, then it's our guest today, which is David Gumbrol, who many of you will know, who did a tremendous webinar with us before Christmas. So good that we thought it was worth having him back again to talk again about his specialist subject, really, which is resilience. As a former teacher and head teacher, David knows a lot about resilience, and now an author and coach, and he's able to share some great wisdom with us. So I can't wait to have a chat with David. It's always great fun to see him. During this conversation, you'll hear us refer briefly, not all the way through, but briefly about Pathway Program, which many people on the call may already be familiar with, which is a new program for personal development and professional development for teachers and leaders, brought to you from NAHT and Discover Education. So if you want to find out more about that, please feel free to click on the URL, which we're going to be sharing in the chat stream throughout, and you can find out much more about Pathway there, or join the discussion outside of this webinar. We always posting various comments and things, and we tend to use the hashtag the whole teacher, because we think Pathway, this new program, is very much about the whole teacher, not just from the neck upwards, your professional capital and currency, but really also about your well-being, your motivation, your resilience. And David is indeed one of the authors, contributing authors on the Pathway program. So we're delighted that he's going to be joining us today. As I've said earlier, a former teacher and head teacher, and now author, coach and lecturer, and has written some tremendous books. We're going to share those with you, actually, some details about his books on resilience at the end. Really enjoyable reads, and as always with David, very insightful. So it only remains really for me to say, David, welcome. I hope you're there. It's great to have your company.
I am indeed here.
We always breathe a sigh of relief because we kneel at the altar of technology on days like today, don't we, sir?
Oh, absolutely. It's a real challenge with technology today, of many days. And but we've got here, and we're very pleased to be here and delighted to be back and trying to offer some advice for colleagues.
You've had a busy day, you were telling me. I think you should share with us the realities of working from home. Oh, disappeared? Hope not. Hello?
Sorry, you froze then, Andrew. So I didn't get your question. So go again.
It's a good start. No, I was just remarking that I know you'd had a rather challenging day today. I thought it was quite interesting.
Well, it just proved it, hasn't it? But yes, I had the boiler fix today, which was interesting when I got two children trying to learn online learning, and a teacher in me and a teacher in my wife. So yes, an interesting day, but a good test for my resilience.
Absolutely, isn't it just? Well, for those on the call who perhaps aren't familiar with you and your work, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself? Is that all right, David?
Absolutely. Well, I'm a head teacher or ex-head teacher, and that's really important to me. So I wasn't a head teacher during a global pandemic, because that's a select band of people that have had that. And I empathise and sympathise in equal portions around the challenges for these people at this time. And so I think my headship experience, my resilience was challenging during that period. And it was very much the starting point, really, for this whole conversation, starting point for a 3-year journey to understand this thing called resilience. And then I approached my local university, which was Kingston University, because I wanted to support the next generation of teachers. So I was starting to wonder why so many people were leaving this wonderful profession and what I could do about it, and came up with the Resilience Project. And essentially that Resilience Project was trying to support the next generation of teachers, the human. So when you were talking about the whole teacher, it really resonates with me, because it was thinking about, well, why are these student teachers not getting through to their 5th year of teaching? What are we doing wrong? And so anyway, went through that project, really enjoyed that project. And then resilience became my thing. So at university, that's what I talk about. And then writing and presenting on this theme for both adults and for children. And it's a theme that I had no idea was going to come in a global pandemic. But nonetheless, I think people are starting to realize that the mental health of all of us has to be top of the agenda.
Doesn't it just? Doesn't it just? And in the previous webinar that we had before Christmas, David, which was beautifully titled I, If and Our, we had a cracking discussion. Now, we're going to share a link to that, aren't we, in the chat stream?
I think so, yeah. I hope so.
Tell us a little bit about that, if you don't mind, before we kick off with this one.
Yeah, well, the idea behind the other one was I like a metaphor, as you know, Andrew, but possibly some people on the call don't know that. So I love a metaphor, and I decided that an eye chart, an optician's eye chart, was a good picture to have in people's minds, because if we've got something there that can then support us and help us in that, then I think that can be really useful. So I then looked at kind of one letter words, 2-letter words, and 3-letter words, and tried to play around with the idea to see where we could go. And then the if came up in kind of Kipling's poem, if you can keep your head when all of those around you are losing theirs. And emotional regulation for me is really important. How do we get emotional regulation? How are we able to achieve emotional regulation? And how are we able to keep emotional regulation? So the idea around the if bit was that, this important thing that we know we all need, but sometimes don't harness and don't look after. R, as in O-U-R, not H-O-U-R or any other variants. Again, the ability to self-regulate, but more about common humanity. We're all in this together. So it's not about an individual, it's about a group of people that are struggling to come to terms with what is going on right now, and above and beyond post-COVID, pre-COVID as well. But at the top of that eye chart was the word I, because actually the focus of attention is around self and strengthening of self. And that's why it was at the top. I wanted it to be at the top deliberately, because generally speaking, the head teachers that I meet are wonderful people who give everything to everybody other than themselves. And somehow we still got into the point where we're not willing to give ourselves the time to recuperate, recover, and to give ourselves, to strengthen the self to be ready for the challenges ahead. So that was the rough idea. And then the 4-letter word that kind of connected into that was I then went for when and trying to move if into when. Yeah. So taking away that excuse. And I think we had a conversation around, if we say, if I've got time, then I will. Well, that's one way of doing it. But when I finish this task, I will, kind of makes that happen straight away, kind of makes that a non-excuse situation. And I think we make too many excuses for not putting something in the school day to look after us.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Well, that was a lovely summary of what was a really insightful webinar. I've thought a lot about it ever since, actually, and we had some terrific feedback. So thank you for doing that. And I'm sure hopefully people will click on that link. And we can see it on your website as well, which we're going to share at the end anyway. So, so thanks for that. So onwards and upwards. So why controlling the controllables then? Another quirky title.
Well,
what's your query here?
Yeah, I mean, the quirky title is me because I think it gets interest. And I think that's important because I think it provokes curiosity. And we need to be more curious about why we're feeling the way we're feeling. And if we can be more curious about that and have an inquiry around that, then we can look into it a little bit more than we do. And it becomes a little bit more high profile than it actually is. So controlling the controllables was a phrase that I used to use when I was feeling out of control. What can I control? Because there's many things that I can't control. So what can I control? Because I want to get back into the driving seat where I feel like I'm making a difference. I feel like there's some changes. I feel like I've got a handhold on this. And I think in this current context, boy, I'll be feeling out of control at times. And we're feeling very vulnerable as a result of that. And actually, I think we had a previous conversation, Andrew, around when we're feeling that vulnerable, what do we need most? And lots of content that's on the internet at the moment, lots of content being really supportive content, is about stuff.
It's stuff. There's a lot of stuff.
And that's not in a negative sense in some respects, but also it's not what's needed. I thought really hard about what actually do people need, and they need reassurance that what they're doing is right. They need reassurance that actually the decisions they're making are the best that they are able to make in very difficult circumstances. And if we can calm the chimp, the anxiety in our mind, and I'm saying chimp because that's Steve Peters' lovely idea of the animal brain in our heads. If we can calm that chimp by ourselves self-regulating, or by others supporting us to help us to self-regulate, then I think we're going to get back into control much more quickly. And if we're able to do that, we'll make better decisions. We'll be happier with what we're doing. We'll feel less anxious. And so reassurance at this time is key. So hopefully colleagues can support each other, but also we can support ourselves, because we need that control. We can't control everybody, can we? We can't control everybody. We can't control all the staff members and the decisions that they're making, but we still want to try. But actually our perception of that could be different if we control ourselves. And then I think if we have control, then we have optimism. And I don't know about you, but my optimism ebbs and flows at times, because I'm only human too, even though I trade on this stuff. And there's a chap called Seth Godin, and I don't know if you're aware of him, but he's a fascinating author.
Right.
And he said, optimism is the most important trait because it allows us to evolve our ideas, improve our situation, and to hope for a better tomorrow. So this idea of hope for tomorrow is there, isn't it? It's tangible. We want it. We all need it, don't we? And that can reassure us if we think it's there. Absolutely. Because the alternative to that is kind of overwhelming, isn't it? It's all consuming, and it has an impact on our mental health, has an impact on our physical health, has an impact on our sleep. Whereas actually, I think what we need to be doing to reassure ourselves, control the controllables. What can you control? You can control your actions now. You can give yourself the time to listen to this conversation. That's a good starting point. One task, one moment, one at a time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Zoom into the now and deal with the now, rather than trying to predict what tomorrow might bring or yesterday did bring.
Consuming otherwise, I think, isn't it?
What about now? Yeah. So I think vulnerability and feeling out of control. And then I love the idea of a remote control, because that's an everyday object and we kind of know where that is, and we know that we know what it looks like, and therefore it's a familiar object. So that's roughly where I was going with this.
So should we explore the significance of the word remote for you then? Because there's several different ways one can interpret that, all of which are apt at the moment, I think, aren't they, for you?
Well, I hope so. And I think the word remote can be, as you say, interpreted in many different ways. Yeah. And that's deliberate, because it's trying to provoke thought, and colleagues can have a think about what remote means to them, and do they feel remote, and in what ways do they feel remote? I mean, essentially, we are remote right now. We should be sitting in a room together and sharing these ideas live, and wouldn't that be lovely? So I think that remote, for me, is feeling a little bit remote, and isolation is not non-connection. Isolation is hard when we're not connecting to people. And I think that's what quite a few of us have found quite tricky during lockdown, and find quite difficult to try and manage colleagues when they're not there, because they're remotely and in their house, and we worry about what they might be doing, could be doing, should be doing. And that's all cognitive upload. That's taking up space in our minds. And that's really tricky for people. And don't forget that isolation is a punishment. If you're in prison, isolation is a punishment for a reason. We're not designed to be on our own. We're not designed to be remote. We're not designed to be on our alone. So I think remote stoofers, beep beeps, whatever we call them, are the kind of reminders of that metaphor. Remind us of being in control, reminding us of having the importance of a sense of control, and that if we can crash out on our sofas when we eventually get home on our school day, look at the moment and think, okay, what am I going to do for myself? How can I control this situation? How can I get control back? I think that would be a really, really helpful thing for people to think around.
What do you think is the most important button on this remote control then?
Well, there are so many buttons on there on modern remote controls. I mean, I don't know where to start really. I mean, there's just so many, aren't there? I think when we're in kind of overload, overwhelm mode, certainly for me, I went in record mode. So I guess record mode is useful because I think when we're in overload, overwhelm, what we tend to do, we can't take everything in. We can't take on the emotional cues and emotional signals. And when we first started teaching, if we can remember all that far back, Andrew, we had that kind of overwhelm, overload feeling, and we kind of pressed record. And then afterwards, we played it back to ourselves and we kind of went, oh, did I do that? Because you've kind of gone into autopilot. And I'm sure that colleagues have had times and moments in the last, in the last month, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, where they felt that. So I think record is an important button, as long as we take the time to press play and watch what we've done over time. The second one I thought of was pause. And that kind of makes sense, really, isn't it? Because I think pause needs to become part of the everyday daily routine. I think there's a sense of back-to-back Zooms and no gaps, and there's no pausing within that. And I don't know if that resonates with you, Andrew, with back-to-back Zooming or back-to-back webinars or whatever you're doing in your role. But scheduling all of that into a daily routine, but we don't schedule in breaks, do we?
No, they're not in the diary.
They're not in the diary. They don't exist. Or do you feel guilty if you put them into your diary?
I tried that once. I actually put in half an hour to work on some paperwork. Essentially, it was to actually have a cup of tea and breathe, but I ended up working on some paperwork instead. Yeah. It still feels wrong, doesn't it, to put something in the diary that is pause or stop or think or consider. And I don't know how we're going to get over that. And I think at this time of anxiety, I think people are probably sitting here feeling guilty that they're listening to this, even though they have every right to listen to this and they need to listen to this in terms of taking some time out for themselves. But I'm sure there's folk feeling guilty. They're wasting time. They're giving time to themselves to stop and think. But keep going is not sustainable, is it? Keep going is, you can only keep going for so much, and then we go bang. And we walk away from the profession, or we start getting resentful about our role, and that's not a positive place to be. But I think in the end, I came to the conclusion that the stop button was the most important for resilience terms, for resilience metaphor analysis, that every now and again, we've got to stop. Every now and again, it's good to stop. Every now and again, we've got to stop this whirring brain going round and round and round and round and round. And if we don't do that, we are on a very negative trajectory, and that's going to have a negative effect on so many different things. We've got to recharge our batteries, essentially, and we can only do that when we stop. And in terms of recharging our batteries, that can be something very simple. A bit of fresh air, walking down to the town and back is fresh air, it's exercise. A little bit of creativity, so we are switching our mind off because we can't concentrate on two things at once. But if we're doing something creative and really in the zone when we're trying to take that photograph or write that poem or complete that sample or whatever it is that we're doing, then that's creative and that's good. Learning, bit of a learning, potentially not about what the latest figures of COVID are, but something of interest to that individual, of intellectual interest to that individual. And then connecting, again, goes back to the same thing. The connecting. How do we connect? How do we get to connection? Connection with loved ones, connection with someone who's going to talk about something other than teaching. Talking to someone who doesn't talk about COVID is quite nice, isn't it? They're a rare breed, aren't they, Andrew? So I think I considered pause, but I went with stop. Which button do you think, Andrew? No, it's got to be stopped, because I think pause, it's always there blinking at you, ready to unpause again. It isn't a proper break, is it really? And I think I wasn't expecting you to say stop. I don't know which one I was expecting you to go for, but I'm pleased. I'm pleased that you've done it, because I mean, I would not have gone for that button. And I think there might be some people on the call. It's presumptuous of me to say so, but they may not have immediately jumped for stop. They would have gone for pause. But I think you're being bullish about this. Goodness, thank goodness. And you're saying, no, actually press stop.
Yeah, and I think that, and I actually am saying that quite deliberately. I'm saying stop. I say pause during the school day, but I'm saying stop in the evenings, because actually, if you don't do that stop and you allow whirring to continue, then you're not going to sleep properly. That's going to have an impact on your sleep. That's going to have an impact on the following day, and we'll talk about that when we're talking about the discovery unit that I was talking about, because that I went into a little bit more detail about sleep then. But I think this kind of online learning and homeschooling and home and work blurring is actually really hard to take that kind of stop button away, because it's there, isn't it? It's ever present.
Yeah, it's always playing. It never stops.
Yeah. And my wife's got this marvelous thing called the Dream Team on her WhatsApp group. And it's called the Dream Team. And basically, it just beeps all the time with various messages from various people, various teachers and staff members who've found a funny picture, or to them it was interesting, or to them it was important at the time. And it can beep in the middle of a meal. It can beep in the middle of a program. It can beep at all sorts of weird and wonderful times. And attention is diverted from stopping and recharging and onto someone else's agenda.
So when you press the stop button then, David, from what you just said then, I'm inferring from that you're removing yourself from your phone. What do you do when you stop?
Well, I think the notification. I think that's an interesting point, because I think we're scared of stopping.
I am.
And actually, lockdown 1 was even challenging for me in terms of having to stop more than I would normally stop, because there wasn't many alternatives at that point. But I think it does mean stop notifications. I think we've allowed the intrusion of work to come too close. I think it's intruded in through the windows and through the door and through the letterbox, and we've allowed it actually gradually, iteratively to happen. And what we've got to do is take control of that, and we've got to stop. So it's no phones at the dinner table and enjoy the meal together. If you're going to go out for a walk, leave your phone behind. It was okay.
I tell you what I've started doing, David. This is an odd thing to admit on a public forum like this. I've started to take a bath, actually. I mean, it's not as I've never ever taken a bath. I don't want to give you that impression, but so I take a bath, and I'm probably not supposed to do this, but I take in my iPad and I watch an episode of Would I Lie to You, which is one of my favorite programs. And I really do switch off when I do that. Do you know? I mean, everybody has their own thing, I hope, but that for me works anyway.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think a favorite program can be, and that can become very routinized again, can't it? Because you can watch one every evening and you're enjoying it, and therefore it becomes a routine. And I think routine is really important. I think it's really valuable to have that routine.
I found that recently.
And I think that's my wife gets very frustrated when we watch kind of box set things, and I just want to watch one episode because I want to treasure that one episode. I don't want to watch the next one. I'm the only person in the world that press stop when it says, do you want the next episode? I'm sure of it. I'm sure I'm the only one in the world that does that.
No, I think rituals and routines, I think they're the things that are going to get us all out of this and get us there. I mean, I bought myself a little rowing machine. It's not a very fancy one. I've got a little rowing machine. And if I'm not on that rowing machine at 6:30 with the radio on, I'm not the same during the day. I need to have that. I mean, not least the effect that the physical exercise has on us, on our mental health, is amazing, isn't it? Anyway, absolutely. But I have to keep to that routine, and I've always done that. And especially at the moment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, habit forming is good, because habit forming makes a priority. Good. Habit forming puts it into the daily diet, into the daily schedule. Then it becomes normalized, and mental health needs to become normalized. And physical health absolutely is connected to mental health. and it allows us to sleep better. And so it's massively important to go on the rowing machine or go out for a walk on a daily basis. Dog walkers are great for going out for a walk on a daily basis because they have to.
And a lovely comment from Rosette. I am going to have to start using the stop button. Good for you. Make that commitment today. Don't turn us off just yet. wait until 5 o'clock. Yeah. So
that's great. Good impact already, Andrew.
So in your inimitable style, you're going to take us on a bit of a journey now on the history of the remote control. We're going to dig a little bit deeper and learn some lessons from the history of the remote control. Is that right, David?
Yeah, we're going to try to. So I just thought it would be of interest. And if I'm saying that learning is important for all of us, then let's do a quick little bit of learning. Basically, I discovered that remote controls weren't distanced in many forms. In terms of the first remote control was called lazy bones, and that first loved the idea of it called being lazy bones, as if we were too lazy to get up from the sofa and turn it off or turn it on. But it was actually connected, Andrew. So it wasn't remote in many ways. It was remote in terms of distance, but it wasn't anything that we would see as a remote control nowadays. I just loved the idea of lazy bones. And then I discovered that this chap who was kind of central to all of this was a man called Mr. Polley. And I don't know why, but that name kind of made me smile. He seemed like a friendly kind of lollipop man or something, rather than a remote controller. But I love the idea that he came up with a lazy bones remote control. And then he developed that into the Flashmatic. And that was a massive device, really, more like a loaded gun. And it had 4 points on the outside edges of the screen. You kind of had to aim it and waft it in the general direction and hope that it gave you one of the 4 options in the corner of that screen. But at least it started to, as it says there on the advert, it cut off the commercials. And I think many of us use the remote control for that purpose, don't we? And then he developed another one after that. So if you could just click on to the next screen, Andrew, then we could see that what the Flashmatic tuning looked like.
Hello?
Is that be possible?
Sorry, David, I lost you then. I hope you can see it now. Yep. Oh.
It doesn't look like that's possible.
Can you see it now?
We're back again, Andrew.
Yeah, I don't know what's happening with the internet. Forgive me.
That's okay. That's okay. So there's no problem. So maybe you pressed the Flashmatic in the wrong direction, Andrew, because maybe you've got one and you just pressed the wrong button, or press pause. Maybe press pause.
I think my internet's trying to stop. I think that's what it is. My internet.
I think it might. It might do, but that's what they actually look like. Because I teach a little bit of history for Initial Teach Training College, so that's what they actually look like. And I love the idea of Flashmatic.
Wow.
And I love the idea of Space Commander as the kind of I'm in control of this kind of out of this world experience of changing the channels. But over the course of that, Andrew, I was thinking that it's interesting, isn't it, that actually remote controls have gone in one direction. They've gone from being connected to remote. And we've kind of gone in that same direction recently, haven't we? Not you and I, but we've gone in that same direction. We were connected and it was easier. And now we've got remote and it's much harder. We're not used to this. We're not good at this. We're not designed for this. We've adapted.
We've lost our tethering, haven't we? If you see what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah. We've lost that cable that connects us. With and Wi-Fi is great, but it's also a little unstable at times, as we're finding. And that's okay. We have to adapt to this world, but actually it's another reminder of controlling and connecting and the importance of both of these things. And I think that we've become so reliant, haven't we, on remote controls that we almost take it for granted that they're there. And I think we've taken for granted our health. We've taken for granted our mental health. We've taken for granted our ability to do the best we can do. But if we don't look after our bodies, then we need to, we're going to struggle. We're reliant on our bodies and our minds being healthy as much as we are reliant on our remote controls to change our channels.
We are completely. And in your books, which I'd love you to talk to us about just briefly. I know you don't like pushing things that you've created, of course not. You're not, but can you share some of the ideas in some of your books, or at least the titles of your books? Because I think people should buy them. They're terrific. Short reads as well. Very short reads.
They are very short reads. They're short, snappy chapters, and that's deliberate because people's time is precious. People's time is really precious to me, and I value every moment of people's times when they can stop and think about it. So it's 39 chapters that are meant to design to lift people up. So it's that quick fix. It's that opportunity to have a little read about something as quirky as remote controls, something as quirky as the history of rope making, and something as quirky as a whole raft of different topics that I touch on. Because it's that curiosity, it's that, and then suddenly we're talking about mental health. Suddenly we're talking about resilience. And then you think, hang on a minute, how have we done that? And that's really important to me. So they're short, snappy titles, short, snappy chapters, 39 of them. So it's like quick fixes, one a week for the academic year, Andrew. So there's something there for everybody. There could be a starter for a staff meeting or just part of a daily diet to read it through in any order you wanted to. So that was for the teachers. That was for adults. And then I took on the challenge of trying to write that same idea, that same concept of a metaphor linked into a resilience point for children. And so the amazing A to Z for resilience for children was trying to take this idea further forwards. So the idea of what Paddington Bear teach us about resilience, for example? What can a kite teach us about resilience? And so there's a whole raft of different ideas there for people to use for assemblies or use with children as they're trying to manage their mental health and have these conversations that otherwise just get forgotten about. Because we're playing catch up, aren't we, Andrew? We're playing academic catch up at the moment, even though we're on remote and we're in a global pandemic. But what we really need to be talking about is this.
Yeah.
Are they in the right place?
That's right.
Here? Because without this being in the right place, there's not enough cognitive load, or whatever the phrases are now, to learn. Because they're anxious about how the technology is working, or they're anxious about mum being ill, or they're anxious about not being able to go out, or not seeing grandma for years and a year. All of these things are playing havoc on their minds. So the books are just there to try and help and support colleagues to open up conversations in an inventive, hopefully creative way.
Well, we had a lovely comment from Joanne. You'll be pleased to hear I've used some of the pages from Lift for my weekly wellbeing email towards the past few terms. That's terrific, Joanne. And you've actually helped because you've said that the title of the book, because David, you're not going to mention the titles of your books, are you? No, I think you should. So so Lift is the first one, yeah? Lift is the first one because it's giving people a lift. And then I went on to Risk because I felt that resilience is around, if we can manage our resilience better, we make better decisions. So if we look after ourselves, then we make more rational decisions. We make decisions that are going to be something we look back on and think, yeah, that was a good decision I've made. I made all my best decisions when I was looking after myself. When I was tired and haggard, I wasn't very good at looking after myself. I didn't make good decisions. And then the one that's coming out in March is around time and task management. And I've gone for the old adage of plate spinning and workload and how we can spin all of those plates. And we're better at spinning plates when we've managed our resilience. So that's cool. We see things, we see when the plates are dropping and we can give them a good spin because we've got the energy to give them a good spin and so on and so forth. And we've had a thank you, David. So that one's called Spin, isn't it? It's a great. That's called Spin, yeah. And great, interesting question from Kevin, actually. Thank you, Kevin. Are there some top tips for parents to develop resilience in these remote learning times? So top tips for parents, well, for parents and the children, he says.
Okay. Top tip for parents or top tip for children is to try and not make it perfect. Try to understand that we're in a weird situation and we're not used to it. And to try and be adaptable, trying to keep you calm. And I would be teaching children emotional regulation. So when they're feeling anxious because the internet connection is kicking out, then they keep calm and they keep cool with it. And they have control of it. And when they don't have control of it, they try to find a solution. And all of these things come through feeling rational. Feeling rational is better when we've managed children's sleep. So we concentrate quite hard on managing our kids' sleep. And we do that by setting role models of managing our sleep and sleeping properly. And we model not having the phones on the dining room table and having dinner together. And we talk about together time, because together time is about connecting, and connecting is nice time because actually it's making us feel less vulnerable, which is what we talked about at the beginning. So I think they're really important techniques that we can try and that we can use. I think that we can also take control of our learning a little bit more than we are. And just because we're not doing the right worksheet at the right time in the right place, we can still do learning. So my daughter has got home learning, of course, but sometimes there's moments where she's got a book that she's interested in and she's wanting to read about it. There's a subject, there's a topic that she's interested in, and she'll go and have a look. And I think that if we can get children to be interested in learning, they'll potentially take it in their own direction when the internet doesn't work, or there's not a laptop available, or the worksheet doesn't quite hit the differentiation mark, or other reasons, of which there are many. Understood. So I would say relax into it, enjoy it when you can, but just try to keep the love of learning rather than the frustration of technology getting in the way of learning.
So true. So true. We've had a lovely comment from Sue, actually. Sue, thank you. David's books are interesting, funny, and incredibly helpful in encouraging us to think about our well-being in many different ways. And you do, actually. I mean, I've known you for a little while now, and I've got all of your books, sir. And you do enable us to approach these important topics like resilience and well-being from very different angles, which I suppose is the beauty of those different metaphors, from lots of different approaches and different angles, turning something quite abstract into something that we can grasp, which is the beauty of a metaphor, isn't it?
And that's deliberate, because it's provoking curiosity, and it's allowing people to go, oh, I didn't know that. And then hopefully it's a ripple effect, because then Sue might say, oh, I didn't know that. But then Sue might go and tell someone else. And then they're having a conversation about mental health, because they might go, you never believe it, I was on a webinar and this bloke was talking about remote controls. Then the only response to that is, well, why? What was he doing that for? And then the person explains what it's all about. And then the ripple effect of mental health goes out from this conversation. So it's very much a part of trying to create this ripple to allow people to have these conversations that are just so important but aren't being had.
So in the last few moments, and that's obviously we have a few more questions, I'm happy to take them. Should we just talk briefly about your interesting pathway course, which you've entitled The Effect of Resilience on Your Ability to Teach? Do you want to just
I genuinely thought that, I mean, it was a fascinating project from the start onwards, really. And I when you talk about the whole teacher, I genuinely mean that. And then I'm here because I care about the whole teacher. And I thought that if I could talk about resilience, and if I could talk about quite blatantly it has an impact on your ability to teach. So that was quite a hard statement to tell you, or to articulate to the audience, but I believe it to be true. And I think the quality of your teaching is basically directly proportional to how much effort you've put in to look after yourself, which is quite a challenging notion. So again, metaphors again. So a bubbly Salterton stone, what's that got to do with resilience? And I won't do any spoiler alerts on here, don't worry, Andrew. But what's a bubbly Salterton stone got to do with resilience? They're very rounded, I'll give you that clue. And a decision maker, so the kind of where you wiggled it in your fingers on the playground, and it was making decisions. And I remember vividly the conversation we had, Andrew, where we were talking about the impact of sleep on decision making. And it kind of was the realization of the fact that you were in control, even when you didn't feel you were in control of determining what the decision making of the future was going to be. And that was my favorite moment of the whole discovery, the whole discovery program. So that's what I was trying to do: metaphors, ideas, and bringing some big thinkers into the party. So my favorite authors around resilience and mental health came on the course with me, came on that journey with me, and I share my favorite quotes from those people, because I believe in the whole teacher. I believe in a focus of well-being, and I hope that course and this webinar has done something to help somebody in this predicament that we find ourselves in at this moment.
And in the bloopers reel that we shared on social media, you were the only one that didn't swear, which was great. So that was a bonus. Great. Clearly my internet is doing some funny things today. I don't know why, but David, the bloopers reel was brilliant, and I very much enjoyed the bloopers reel. Well, we've put a link in the chat. If you can hear me, I hope my internet is holding up, where you can find out a little bit more about the Pathway program, and you'll be able to find out some information.
I mean, the bloopers was fantastic opportunity for us to think about and to consider. Maybe it wasn't all as professional at all times, but I'm very proud to say that I didn't make too many on my first go, and the final product is testament to the hard work of the crew that did a fantastic job of not only the bloopers but the program.
Great stuff. Well, if you can hear me, thank you, David. Thank you so much for your contribution today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks again for joining us. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I hope my internet is still holding up. If it isn't, then I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you have a good rest of the day. We're going to be meeting with Guy Dudley next Tuesday for another webinar. Those of you who've been on these webinars before will be very familiar with Guy Dudley, Head of Advice at the NAHT, on the telephone to head teachers and leaders very regularly. And gosh, another very insightful speaker with so many different pieces of advice for us, particularly at the moment in these current times. So we're going to be talking about remote teaching. We're going to be talking about remote leading and all the different challenges that COVID is still presenting us with and throwing at us constantly. So Guy is he has his finger on the pulse there. So we're going to be sharing some responses to COVID. And then we're going to talk about some of the, as I used to call it, jobs for the weekend. I probably shouldn't call it that, but from a Gardener's World reference, jobs for the weekend, those you can catch up on at the moment, perhaps if you do actually have any spare time, some bits and pieces that you could be catching up on if you have the time. So some interesting pieces there, and we're going to do that in the style of a quiz. Actually, I think we're going to have a go at setting up the style of a pub quiz. I think with some multiple choice questions which Guy's going to pose. That's going to be good fun. So join us next Tuesday, I think, 4 o'clock on the 19th, and then following that, we're going to have a terrific session with Hayley McKetney, very experienced senior teacher and SEN teacher from Lee Chapel Primary in London. And we're going to be having a look at some strategies for promoting positive behaviour for learning, particularly at the moment. So I think that's going to be terrific. I do hope you can join us for that one too. And as I've said all along, if you'd like to find out any more about the Pathway programme, where we are very much pushing and promoting personal development as well as professional development, the whole you, if you like, find out more on that URL there if you can on our website /Pathway, and join the discussion on social media if you have the moment. But please, in closing, please make sure at some stage this evening you press the stop button and switch off. So in that spirit, I'll bid you goodbye and hopefully we'll see you next Tuesday. Many thanks.